After spending over $7 billion to date just in Los Angeles to combat the homelessness crisis, in scare quotes, the mayor laid out the bag what the real problem is and what the real success so far has been. And the problem is, well, you and me. How can that be? Well, in the interview with UCLA's Blueprint. Now, it's interesting. First off, Karen Bass is a USC alum. UCLA, it's interesting when you talk about homelessness, they literally are squatters on land. Their baseball stadium and parking lot associated is basically squatting land that was given to house homeless veterans and was designed to house 5,000 veterans. And they've been fighting a federal court decision for over 10 years to get off land. So they're like mystified. Well, how is there homelessness when they literally threw out homeless veterans and put their baseball stadium there? So they're interviewing Karen Bass, our mayor, and they give her a pass. The subtitle, if you read it, is Karen Bass and Housing My People, because there's nothing that speaks to wanting to solve the housing crisis like identifying with the people who are living on the street. So I don't know if Karen Bass is saying that her people are criminals and drug users and the kind of people that are on the streets, or somehow I'm sure the idea she was making about racism and sexism, but her people are the people on the street. They may have voted for her, but who knows how that happened. But anyhow, her people. And so UCLA asks her, again, they're literally squatting on land for veterans, but they actually ask her the question, how do you measure progress? And this is a woman who gets paid a lot of money to be the mayor of Los Angeles, who's spending billions of dollars and is advocating spending more billions of dollars. And they ask her, how do you measure success? And she lets the whole trick out of the bag. She says, I think that probably the greatest success was disproving the myth that people don't want to leave the streets. What that tells me is there's a way out of this, that's solvable. Now, two things I would say about that is, one, nowhere in this article or nowhere in the world has Karen Bass or anybody proven that people who are on the streets want to leave the streets. There's a lot of evidence suggesting that's where they want to be, primarily because housing options don't incorporate use for drugs and other crime and prostitution and sex abuse, which we know goes on in the homeless areas. And many times the people leave provided housing and don't go into it because they want to be able to partake of their drugs on the street, and the city in many cases giving them access to free drugs. So there's no proof about that. We're going to look at the statistics. Statistics are nasty things. But that's her success after billions of dollars. Not X amount of people aren't homeless anymore. Not, we've saved a number of lives. No, we've disproven you're wrong. You think people want to stay on the street. She now knows and has proved with your tax dollars that the reason why they really went off the street. So to show you how not committed she is to the problem, there's a federal lawsuit where the federal government is forcing the government to address the homelessness. And this is what's used as excuse for all the budget. So you might think that if a federal court judge, and there's a lawsuit between the federal government, the state government, county governments, you might think the mayor might want to weigh in, might use the opportunity to share her vision, her plan, push her agenda. Normally people, when they really believe in something, this is an interesting fact I've learned in my life, people really believe in something are always glad to find an audience to talk about it. And yet when they don't want to talk about it, it tells you that they're covering something up. And so here's a case where we have a federal court hearing and Mayor Bass will, I got the wrong share on here. Hold on one second. Sorry about that. I have the wrong file up. Here we have Mayor Bass is forced to testify, and then what happens is they use some legal wrangling to get her out of having to testify, saying that it would take months to get her, meaning they acknowledge she should have to testify. But they could waste taxpayer dollars and slow down the court case and use the tactic of her not being able to be forced. She works downtown. How hard is it for her to go to court? You or I have to take a day off of work and drive downtown and park. She's already there. You and I aren't involved with these. When we're involved with a court case, typically it's a problem or some sort of odd situation. She's the mayor who you think would want to talk about her solution for homelessness. No, she is actually fighting, sharing what her solution would be to a federal court judge. Why would that be? Well, could it be, I'm going to give you the hint here, could it be the statistics aren't so bright? Now, previously I documented, and there are statistics online, that the city of LA estimates about 46,000 homeless people. It's down from last year, they want to tell you. Now, that's just because they couldn't get enough volunteers to count. And one of the tricks in LA is by not counting certain crimes, crime goes down. And then in this case, not counting homelessness enough, they can say homelessness went down, what doesn't appear that way to the naked eye. But even using their statistics, even going on to the city statistics, they claim that the city has served only 4,316 people total, less than 10% of the homelessness are served in any manner. Service could mean getting them temporary housing, getting them a motel, getting something. That's it. Now, we spent $450 million on expenses this fiscal year. Interesting numbers here. 1,039 of the 4,300 were put into housing. Don't know how long they'll stay there. Average is less than 2 years. And as evidenced by, look at this, program exits, 1,760, meaning more people exited the program than went in the program. And if you look at the program exits are people who returned to homelessness, 1,579. So what it means is over the course of time, over the last 2 years, there were about 1,500 people who were served last year, year before, who said, I really want to go back to the streets. Some end up in medical substance facilities, 85 were incarcerated. That doesn't look good. 73 died, tragic, I'm sure each one, for sure. But my point is, more people returned to homeless than we put in housing in the fiscal year. So remember, Mayor Bass's claim of her biggest success, let's go back to that, in UCLA's blueprint. Of course, they don't dare ask her, isn't that stupid? How do you measure success? And her answer is, the greatest success was disproving the myth that people don't want to go back to the streets. Yet, the statistics show more people have gone back, not even half, not a third, more have come back to the streets than we served by over 70%. So A, her greatest success, the myth, disproving is wrong. B, who cares about the myth? If you have 46,000 people living homeless, not only do those 46,000 people need some sort of service, but the rest of us need a clean city. The rest of us need a safe city. And we know these are breeding grounds for crime and all kinds of problems and health issues. So by any measure, Mayor Bass is a failure when it deals with housing, and the city of Los Angeles is a failure. Now, I realize it's a low bar to prove the city is dysfunctional. As I'm speaking, we have riots downtown, people from foreign countries flying foreign flags, attacking policemen. I mean, I'm only laughing because it's so sad. And traffic halted on the 101 freeway over this nonsense. So we have a city that's obviously dysfunctional. But on this issue, they spent so far $7 billion. They want another couple billion. Remember, we raised our taxes on mansions, which have hurt not just mansions, but sales of commercial property, multifamily property, all this attention to a problem that is spinning out of control. Based on the statistics, no, we're not making a dent in it. We're not even slowing it down. It's getting worse faster than we get it better. So that's the homeless situation. Let's talk about the general real estate market statistics. Where are we overall? Well, what do you think about LA City homelessness? Am I being too harsh here? If you think I'm being a harsh critic of Mayor Bass, let me know. I'm open to criticism. If you have some statistics that disprove what I've said, let me know. I'd like to hear about it. If you think your money is well spent, let me know. Down the street, there's a house going for sale. I'm sure they're going to price it at $4.99 million or $5 million to avoid the new mansion tax of 5%. You say, well, how much is that in a mansion? Well, in a $5 million house, that's $250,000. And you might say, well, but that's not a lot of money. It's only 5%. Well, think about that. It is $250,000. I mean, you could sell the house and throw in a couple brand new cars. You could throw in a couple brand new Suburbans. You could throw in, a couple pools. I don't know. To me, it seems like a lot of money that would put to tax dollars if we're misusing the money. And it looks like based on our homelessness, which is what this money was used for, we are misusing the money. Okay, let's talk about the overall real estate market. Where it's today. If you read the news, you might hear about interest rates being historically high. The reality is they're about where they've been for a year. In fact, they're about where they've been. If you look over the last 5 years, really the whole COVID period, they went up from historically low periods to where we are now. But if you go back in time, you can see that over time, before 2000, the rates we have now are lower than many. I started the business in 1987. These are low rates by historical standards. So they're maybe in the average if you take the last few years. I'm not saying it's good. And I'm saying rates should be lower only because of the government misspending. But the rates are historically about average where they've been over the last 40 years or so. They're not the reason why people can't buy houses. It's more the income and the tax side that's the problem. As far as inventory, which is the other side of the equation, inventory continues to be rising, though we're still well below the pre-pandemic numbers. So what we have here is a case where we have structural problems in our housing market. We don't have enough houses being built, and that's why the inventory is so low. When inventory is low, prices go up, people can't afford it. That's the source of the problem. But the inventory still is rising, and rising from the pandemic bottoms, but overall is still low by historical standards, too low, because we really have a limitation on how many houses we built nationwide. And then overall, the market is very localized. Let's take a look at here in Los Angeles. We're 37 by Altos Research, a great research source, takes all the different factors and puts them together. And 37 is a slight seller's market. You can see 30 is probably a equilibrium point, and we've been 37, 38, 39 for the last few months. So if you look at all the factors, it's still a seller's market overall. Okay, so let's take a look at the news. One of my favorite activities is to kind of hold some of the news people accountable. One of the worst articles of the week, one of the worst news stories was actually put out by the CEO of Compass, Robert Reffkin. He might be a great guy. He really might be. I've never met him. I don't want to say anything about him personally. But his coverage of the press is just mystifying. Here's a case. AOL runs a story from Business Insider. This is kind of how the echo chamber of news works in our society, where a company like Compass buys advertising, and then all of these companies just echo whatever he says. 3 reasons a great time to buy a home, according to Compass. Now, that's an interesting statement. It's a great time to buy a home as opposed to when. Is it better now than 6 months ago? Is it better now than being a year ago? What's fascinating about this statement is not the statement itself. You can make that claim. But in the same talk, the same article quotes him as saying that prices are going to go down this coming year about 1%. Where's this number? Yeah, it's more likely that home prices will fall slightly in the second half of the year. Well, okay, so think about this. You buy a house for, say, $500,000, and it goes down 1%, it's $5,000. So you're going to lose 1% right off the bat. And then he says, which is also true, that in inflationary times, if the value goes down, not up, you're losing ground. So whereas houses have traditionally averaged increasing, 3% per year increase, with inflation now at 3%, he's saying, in essence, you're losing the 1% of prices going down, plus 3%, you lose 4%. So he's saying it's a great time to buy a home. You're going to lose about $20,000 compared to inflation. Let's say if you put the money in some sort of investment that got you a 3% return, comparing it to that, the house will lose $20,000, but it's a great time to buy. It can't be both. And I think this is just a case where somebody is looking to say things that gets attention, and you have this receptacle called the real estate press who fawns over Robert Reffkin. Everything he says is like mystifying. And so on one hand, he says a great time to buy. On the other hand, he kind of proves that it might not be a great time to buy. Personally, I say it's a good time to buy. It's a good time for you to buy. When you can afford it, get in when you can. I think predictions of the market are very difficult. And the other thing I'd say about Robert Reffkin, again, he might be a really nice person, but he has no special experience in economics. He has no special training in economics. He doesn't have a crystal ball. I have a crystal ball. It's right there. It doesn't really work, but if you look over my finger, there's a crystal ball. But nobody knows where the market's headed. Do you know if we're going to go to war with China? Do you know how the tariff things work out? If anything, all our economy is so volatile right now, to project and say, A, is a good time to buy, but B, I know housing prices are going down. Those are two pretty bold, but obviously divergent predictions. And I just think in general, we're always best to work on what is and what the cards were dealt rather than guessing the cards going forward. And I think both in Reffkin, he gets very positive press, and fairly so, to all of our detriment, as well as I think the real estate press does a terrible job. Okay, here's another bad story. This is Newsweek, very misleading. California homeowner, notice it's singular, slashes asking price by half as housing market struggles. Now, you would infer that the California homeowner, that his or her slashing of the price is indicative of the housing market struggling, or is a cause of the housing market struggling, right? It's related somehow. Well, it's really unrelated. In this case, they talk about this particular homeowner listed their house for like $3.5 million in 2021, 2022. And then kept cutting the price until recently when it hit the price listing, hit 1.9 million, it sold and then closed at 1.866. Well, all that tells you is they overlisted it from the beginning. And maybe this house went down in value, but there's no houses in California that got down that much. What happened was they overestimated the value or weren't that motivated. And I've had sellers do that. I've had sellers all the time who want to list. I have one right now wants to list at $8 million and the market's not supporting it, but they want to test the higher price for whatever reason. That's a seller's prerogative. But the fact that they overprice it and then later have to cut it to sell it, that's a common phenomena. Doesn't mean the housing market it's not proof that the housing market's struggling. It's just proof that seller overpriced the house. And in this case, once they got down to a number that's reasonable, it's sold. Imagine that. So again, Newsweek, are they still in business? They're not. I don't think there's a print version anymore. And the reason why is because their news is just horrific. It's just a constant source of nonsense. Here's another one, not much better. The real estate news. Now you have to go behind the paywall. It's so funny because if you just copy and paste and put it into another website, you get the whole article for free. So I don't know if their security is bad or what the story is, but their article of the week was sellers start holding back as market demands drag. Now, what they would have you believe is that sellers sit around and look at the newspaper and go, oh my gosh, the housing market's slow, we're not going to sell our house. In my experience, no sellers really make that decision. Sellers either decide because they have to, somebody died, somebody's getting divorced, there's a new baby, somebody moved out of the house and they're getting older, health issues, or they want to sell the house and buy another one, but usually they're buying up more often than down. And if you're buying up, the fact the market's slow is a good thing because the house you're trying to buy being more expensive, the fact that that price isn't rising is to your advantage. So very rarely do sellers back out because the market is not turning in their favor. They back out because they're not ready to sell. Buyers won't pay an increasing price. Sometimes sellers overlist, as we just discussed, and buyers will reach the market in a hot market. They'll step up to the newer prices. And sometimes sellers will take their house off the market after it hasn't sold because they realize they weren't reasonable what they expected. But there's never sellers holding back because the market demand drags. That's not what happens. And so again, this is the real estate news that I think is giving us bad real estate news. What do you see? I think as a real estate broker in the business every day, selling houses, representing mostly sellers, sometimes buyers, I just find so many people have such bad impressions and understandings of how the market works. And my job as a broker is to educate. That's why I do this podcast and other podcasts as well. But what do you think? Am I being too harsh? Let me know. Put your comments down. If you'd like to subscribe, as always, if I can help, please reach out at Bill Gross Probate on social media and make today your best day ever. Thanks so much.